They say be careful who you step on while climbing the ladder, because you might meet them on your way down. But Carter Bennett didn't just step on his wife, Sophie. He crushed her, mocked her silence, and laughed as he signed the divorce papers that would leave her penniless. He thought he was discarding a burden, a plain, quiet woman who brought nothing to his flashy lifestyle. He had no idea that the ink on those papers didn't just end a marriage. It unlocked a $1 trillion empire that had been testing his character for 3 years. And Carter? He failed the test. The air conditioning in the conference room of Finch & Associates was set to a chilling 65 degrees, but it wasn't nearly as cold as the smirk on Carter Bennett's face. He sat at the head of the mahogany table, his tailored Italian suit hugging his frame, a gold Rolex glinting under the fluorescent lights as he tapped a fountain pen against the heavy oak. Opposite him sat Sophie. She wore a simple, slightly worn grey cardigan and jeans that had seen better days. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she looked at her hands, which were folded quietly in her lap. To anyone looking in, she was the picture of defeat. "Come on, Sophie," Carter said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy that barely masked his impatience. "Let's get this over with. I have a reservation at Le Bernardin in an hour, and unlike you, I don't like to keep people waiting." Mr. Finch, Carter's high-priced attorney, slid the document across the table. "Mrs. Bennett, as discussed, the terms are final. You receive the 2018 Honda Civic, the contents of the guest bedroom, and a one-time settlement of $5,000. In exchange, you waive all rights to Mr. Bennett's future earnings, his equity in Bennett Dynamics, and the penthouse on Fifth Avenue." Sophie looked up, her blue eyes unreadable. "I understand." Carter chuckled, a harsh sound that grated against the silence. "You understand. Sophie, you should be thanking me. $5,000 is more money than you've ever seen in your life. It's enough to get you a nice little trailer somewhere in, wherever it is people like you go." He leaned forward, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Face it, honey. You were a charity case. I married you because I needed a stable, boring wife to make the board of directors trust me. I needed to look like a family man. But now, Bennett Dynamics is about to go public. I'm going to be a king in this city, and kings don't drag around peasants." Sophie didn't flinch. She picked up the pen. "Is Vanessa waiting in the car, Carter?" Carter froze for a split second, then grinned. "Vanessa is waiting in the lobby. She's the kind of woman a man like me deserves. She has style, she has class, and she knows how to host a dinner party without embarrassing me. Unlike you." Sophie nodded slowly. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply uncapped the pen and signed her name in neat, cursive letters. Sophie Caldwell. She dropped the Bennett immediately. "Done," she whispered. Carter snatched the papers away as if afraid she might change her mind. He quickly scribbled his own signature, flourishing the C with dramatic flair. "Finally," Carter exhaled, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "Mr. Finch, handle the filing. I'm a free man." He walked to the door, but stopped and turned back to Sophie, who was still sitting there. He pulled a $100 bill from his wallet and tossed it onto the table. It fluttered down, landing near her hand. "For a taxi," he sneered. "Don't say I never gave you anything." Sophie looked at the money, then up at him. For the first time in 3 years, the submissive, quiet look in her eyes vanished, replaced by something cold and sharp as diamond. "Keep it, Carter," she said softly. "You're going to need every penny soon." Carter laughed, shaking his head. "Pathetic." He slammed the door behind him, leaving Sophie alone in the cold conference room. As the vibrations of the slam faded, Sophie reached into her worn tote bag. She didn't pull out a tissue. She pulled out a sleek, black, secure line phone that looked more like military hardware than a consumer device. She dialed a single number. "Status?" A deep voice answered instantly. "It's done. Heavy as the head that wears the crown," Sophie said, her voice changing completely. The timidness was gone, replaced by the commanding tone of someone used to being obeyed instantly. He signed. "Initiate Protocol Omega." "Understood. Excuse me, Miss Caldwell. The Gulf Stream is waiting at Teterboro, and the board of the Obsidian Group is ready for your arrival." Sophie stood up, smoothing down her cheap cardigan. "Good. Buy Bennett Dynamics. Don't acquire it. Destroy it. I want the stock at 0 by Friday." "With pleasure, ma'am." Carter Bennett stepped out of the law office building feeling lighter than air. The New York sun seemed to shine specifically for him. He spotted the cherry-red Porsche 911 parked at the curb, the engine idling with a low growl. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Vanessa. She was stunning, blonde hair blown out to perfection, oversized sunglasses, and wearing a dress that cost more than Sophie's entire wardrobe. "Is it done?" she asked, popping a piece of gum. "Dust," Carter said, sliding into the driver's seat and revving the engine. "She's history. Signed everything away for a used Honda and $5,000. Vanessa threw her head back and laughed. "Oh my God, what a loser. I almost feel bad for her." "Almost." "Don't waste your pity," Carter said, merging aggressively into traffic. She was a leech. "But now, babe, it's just us. And the IPO. Do you know what the valuation is looking like? The analysts are saying Bennett Dynamics opens at $40 a share. I'll be worth $50 million by lunch tomorrow." $50 million, Vanessa poured, placing a hand on his thigh. "We should look at that estate in the Hamptons, the one with the private beach." "Buy it," Carter said arrogantly. "Buy 2. They spent the afternoon in a blur of luxury. Carter bought a $20,000 watch just because he liked the color of the face. They drank vintage Dom Perignon at lunch. He ignored 3 calls from his CFO, assumes it was just nervous energy about the public offering. By the time he dropped Vanessa off at her apartment to change for their celebratory dinner, Carter was high on his own success. He drove to the headquarters of Bennett Dynamics, a sleek glass building in Midtown. He wanted to walk through the lobby and feel the power of ownership one last time before the IPO turned him into a legend. He strolled through the automatic doors, nodding at the security guard. "Evening, Jerry." Jerry, usually friendly, didn't smile. He looked down at his desk, shifting uncomfortably. "Mr. Bennett." Carter frowned but kept walking. He stepped into the elevator and hit the button for the top floor. When the doors opened, he expected the usual hum of activity. Analysts working late, phones ringing. Instead, the office was dead silent. He walked toward his corner office, but stopped when he saw his CFO, Mark, sitting in the open conference area. Mark had his head in his hands. "Mark?" Carter asked, annoyed. "Why isn't the team prepping the S1 filings? We launch in the morning." Mark looked up. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead. "Carter, didn't you check your email? I've been busy celebrating my divorce. What is it? A compliance issue? We can fix it." "It's not compliance," Mark whispered. "It's the financing, the primary venture capital firm that was backing our debt. They pulled the plug." Carter felt a cold stone drop in his stomach. "What? Argus Capital? They can't pull out. We have a contract." "They have a clause," Mark said, his voice shaking. "A character and stability clause. They invoked it an hour ago. They said the leadership of the company is volatile. They called in the loans, Carter. All of them. Immediately." "That's impossible," Carter screamed, slamming his hand on a desk. "I'm the most stable CEO in this sector. Who is Argus Capital anyway? Get them on the phone." "I tried," Mark said. "They aren't answering, but that's not the worst part." What could be worse than losing our backing the night before the IPO? Mark turned his laptop around. On the screen was a press release from a massive global conglomerate known only as the Obsidian Group. Breaking news. The Obsidian Group announces hostile takeover bid for key supply chains in the tech sector. All manufacturing partners for Bennett Dynamics have ceased production, effective immediately pending restructuring. Carter stared at the screen. Obsidian? Who are they? I've never even heard of them. Nobody has, Mark said, terrified. They're a ghost firm. They own everything, but put their name on nothing. Real estate, shipping, rare earth minerals. Carter, they just bought the factories in Taiwan that make our chips. They cut us off. Without those chips, we have no product. Carter loosened his tie, breathing hard. This is a coordinated attack. Who did I piss off? Is it Musk? Zuckerberg? I don't know, Mark said. But there's a rumor on the street. Obsidian is run by a single family. Old money. The kind of money that makes billionaires look like beggars. They say the Heiress just took over active management today. Carter scoffed, trying to regain his composure. I don't care if it's the Queen of England. I'm Carter Bennett. I can fix this. I'll find new investors. I'll find new factories. He pulled out his phone to call his contacts at J.P. Morgan. Blocked. He called his contact at Goldman Sachs. Straight to voicemail. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Vanessa. Hey babe, my credit card just got declined at the salon. You said you paid the bill? Carter stared at the phone. His hands started to tremble. While Carter was sweating through his Italian suit in Midtown, a convoy of 3 blacked-out Cadillac Escalades was sweeping through the gates of a private airfield in New Jersey. The lead car stopped, and a security detail in dark suits swarmed the door. They opened it, and Sophie stepped out. She was no longer wearing the grey cardigan. She was dressed in a sharp, tailored white pantsuit by Alexander McQueen. Her hair was down, cascading in loose waves over her shoulders. She wore oversized sunglasses, not to hide, but to intimidate. On her wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch, worth more than Carter's entire company. A tall, distinguished man with silver hair was waiting by the steps of the massive Gulfstream G650 jet. This was William, the family's long-time advisor and fixer. "Welcome back, madam," William said, bowing his head slightly. "It is good to see you in your true element." Sophie took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were sharp. "Is the transfer complete, William?" "Yes." The divorce decree was filed at 4:02 p.m., legally severing all ties. You are officially no longer liable for Mr. Bennett's debts, which is fortunate. William allowed a small, dry smile, considering the amount of debt he has acquired in the last 90 minutes. Sophie walked up the stairs of the jet, the heels of her Louboutins clicking rhythmically. Inside, the cabin was pure luxury. Cream leather, gold accents, and a holographic display table in the center. She sat down and swiped the table. A 3D graph of Bennett Dynamics appeared. The line was plummeting red. "He mocked my mother's sweater," Sophie said softly, looking at the data. "That grey cardigan. He told me I looked like a librarian. He didn't know my mother knitted that for me before she passed. He called me a peasant." William poured her a glass of sparkling water. "Arrogance is a blinding vice, madam. Mr. Bennett never bothered to ask about your family name. He assumed Caldwell was common. He didn't realize it was the Caldwells, the banking dynasty that financed the railways in the 1800s and the tech boom of the 1990s. He never asked me anything," Sophie corrected. "He only talked about himself. He kept me around because he thought I was safe. Dumb. Mute. She zoomed in on the graph. What's his current liquidity? He is leveraged to the hilt, William reported. He took out a personal loan against his equity to buy an engagement ring for a Miss Vanessa Lewis, a 10-carat yellow diamond. Sophie laughed, a genuine, amused sound. Yellow diamonds are tacky. Cancel his credit lines at the bank, all of them. On what grounds? On the grounds that the bank belongs to me, Sophie said simply. William nodded. Done. Also, madam, there is the matter of the gala tomorrow night. The Met, Carter Bennett purchased a table to celebrate his IPO. He plans to debut Miss Lewis there. Sophie's eyes gleamed. The Met Gala. The theme is gilded glamour, isn't it? Perfect. Shall I cancel his tickets? No, Sophie smiled, and it was a smile that would have made a shark swim away in fear. Let him go. Let him put on his tuxedo. Let him parade his mistress around. I want him to be at the absolute peak of his delusion when the floor falls out. And you, madam? Will you be attending? Oh, I'll be there, Sophie said, looking out the window as the jet engines roared to life. But Sophie Bennett won't be there. The world is about to meet Sophia Caldwell for the first time. Make sure the press is ready. I want the front page of the Times, the Journal, and Vogue. The jet began to taxi. Sophie leaned back. He wanted a trophy wife, she whispered to the empty air. He's about to find out he married the hunter. The Metropolitan Museum of Art stairs were draped in crimson and gold, a tribute to the evening's theme. Gilded glamour. It was the most important night in the New York social calendar, a night where status was currency and obscurity was a death sentence. Carter Bennett adjusted his bow tie in the rearview mirror of the limousine. His hands were shaking, though he would never admit it to Vanessa. His phone had been buzzing incessantly for the last 4 hours. Mark, his CFO, had sent 42 text messages. The last one read, "The SEC is asking for comments on the Obsidian takeover. We are insolvent, Carter. Don't go to the gala. Go to a lawyer." Carter had deleted the message. He was operating on pure denial. If he could just walk the carpet, if he could just be seen shaking hands with the industry titans, the stock price would stabilize. Perception was reality. He just needed to look rich. "Stop fidgeting," Vanessa snapped. She was wearing a silver sequined gown that left little to the imagination. It was flashy, loud, and expensive, exactly what she thought class looked like. "Do I look good?" "You look like $1 million," Carter muttered, staring out the tinted window. "Only $1 million," she pouted. "Tonight, I want to look like $1 billion. By the way, the card you gave me for the makeup artist was declined. I had to use my own. You'll transfer me the cash tomorrow, right?" Carter swallowed hard. "Bank glitch. I'll sort it out." The limo slowed to a halt. The door opened, and the wall of noise hit them instantly. Flash, flash, flash. The paparazzi were screaming names, a chaotic symphony of worship. Carter stepped out, putting on his best winning smile. He extended a hand to Vanessa, and they began the ascent up the famous steps. He waved, waiting for the reporters to call his name. But they didn't. The cameras weren't pointed at him. They were angling past him, looking toward the arrival of a convoy that had just pulled up. It wasn't a limo. It was a fleet of 3 matching Rolls-Royce Phantoms, painted a deep, midnight blue. "Who is that?" Vanessa asked, annoyed that the attention had shifted. "Move, Carter. Get in the shot." Carter tried to pose, but a security guard in a headset stepped in front of him. "Sir, please move to the side. We need to clear the carpet for the guest of honor." "Excuse me?" Carter bristled, his ego flaring. "Do you know who I am? I'm Carter Bennett. I bought a $50,000 table." "And you're blocking the entrance," the guard said impassively, physically steering Carter toward the edge of the red carpet, right next to the reporters who were ignoring him. A hush fell over the crowd, followed by a sudden, intense roar of excitement. The door of the lead phantom opened. First came the security, 4 men who moved with the precision of special forces. Then a woman stepped out. She was breathtaking. She wore a custom gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light, adorned with a cascade of diamonds that started at her shoulder and wound down her back like a constellation. The dress was structured, regal, and dangerous. Her hair was swept up in an intricate modern style, revealing a neck that held a necklace featuring a sapphire the size of a pigeon's egg. It was the Star of the East sapphire, a jewel that hadn't been seen in public since 1952. "Who is she?" a reporter next to Carter whispered frantically. "Is that a model? An actress?" "No," another photographer said, checking his viewfinder. "My God, that's the Caldwell heiress. The rumors were true. She's come out of hiding." Carter squinted. The woman turned to face the cameras, her expression cool, detached, and utterly imperious. Carter's heart stopped. The breath left his lungs in a painful wheeze. He knew that nose. He knew the curve of that jaw. He knew those eyes, even though they were currently lined with smoky makeup that made them look fierce. "Sophie," he whispered. Vanessa laughed. "What?" "That billionaire goddess. Carter, have you lost your mind? That looks nothing like your frumpy ex-wife." But Carter couldn't look away. It was impossible. Sophie was a mouse. She wore clearance rack clothes. She clipped coupons. She apologized when he bumped into her. This woman walked like she owned the pavement beneath her feet. As if sensing his gaze, the woman turned. Her blue eyes scanned the crowd, gliding over the screaming photographers, over the desperate socialites, until they locked directly onto Carter. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She simply held his gaze for 3 agonizing seconds, raising one perfectly manicured eyebrow. It was a look of total, crushing superiority. Then she turned away and walked up the stairs, the long train of her velvet dress trailing behind her like royalty. "Mr. Bennett?" A reporter suddenly thrust a microphone in his face. "Is it true Bennett Dynamics is under investigation for fraud as of this afternoon? Comment on the rumor that you've been locked out of your own headquarters." Carter, pale. "No comment," he stammered, grabbing Vanessa's arm. "We need to get inside, now." "You're hurting me," Vanessa hissed as he dragged her through the doors. "Who was that woman? Why did she look at you like you were a bug?" Carter didn't answer. His mind was racing. "It can't be her. It's just a look-alike. Sophie is in a motel somewhere crying over her Honda Civic. She has to be." But deep in his gut, the cold terror was spreading. He had signed the papers. He had mocked her. And now he had a sinking feeling that the peasant he had discarded was about to burn his kingdom to the ground. The great hall of the museum had been transformed into a dining room fit for Versailles. Massive chandeliers dripped with crystals, and the tables were laden with gold plates and towering floral arrangements. Carter scanned the seating chart near the entrance, looking for his table. He expected to be near the front, perhaps near the mayor or the tech giants. "Table 84, the usher said, handing him a card. 84. Carter frowned. "There must be a mistake. I'm a platinum sponsor." "Table 84, the usher repeated, pointing toward the back of the room, near the swinging doors of the kitchen and the restrooms. "This is humiliating," Vanessa hissed, smoothing her dress. "We're sitting next to the toilets, Carter. People are staring." They sat down. Their table mates were the B-list attendees, a washed-up reality TV star and a nervous-looking junior accountant from a logistics firm. Carter poured himself a glass of wine, his hand shaking so badly He spilled a drop on the white tablecloth. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed over the speakers, "please welcome the new chairwoman of the museum board and the CEO of the Obsidian Group, Miss Sophia Caldwell." The room erupted in applause. The spotlight swung to the center stage. There she was, Sophie, standing at the podium, looking out over the sea of New York's elite. She adjusted the microphone, her diamonds catching the light. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was the same one that used to ask Carter what he wanted for dinner, but the timbre was different. It was steel wrapped in silk. "For years, the Obsidian Group has operated in the shadows. We built the infrastructure that powers your world. But today, we step into the light." Carter felt like he was going to vomit. It was her. It was undeniable. The woman he had called boring, the woman he had told was lucky to be with him. She was the head of the most powerful conglomerate on Earth, Sophie continued, her eyes scanning the room. "We value integrity. We value loyalty. And tonight, I am announcing our newest acquisition. We believe in cleaning up the market, removing the rot." The giant screen behind her flickered to life. A company logo appeared. It was the logo for Bennett Dynamics. A murmur went through the crowd. "This afternoon," Sophie announced calmly, "Obsidian acquired a controlling interest in Bennett Dynamics." Carter stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "No!" he shouted. "That's a lie!" The room went silent. Heads turned toward table 84 near the bathrooms. Sophie looked down from the stage. She didn't look surprised. She looked bored. "Ah," she said into the microphone. "Mr. Bennett, I was wondering if you would make it. Security, could you bring a microphone to table 84? I believe the former CEO has something to say." A spotlight hit Carter, blinding him. He shielded his eyes, sweating profusely. A host thrust a mic into his hand. "Sophie," Carter snarled, his voice echoing through the hall. "Stop this charade. You can't buy my company. I own 51% of the voting shares. You're my wife. You can't do this." A gasp rippled through the audience. "Wife?" Sophie smiled. It was a terrifying expression. "Correction, Carter. I was your wife. As of 4:02 p.m. yesterday, I am your ex-wife. And as for your shares..." She clicked a remote in her hand. The screen behind her changed. It displayed a document. It was the divorce settlement Carter had signed just 24 hours ago. The specific clause was highlighted in red. "Mr. Bennett retains sole ownership of his personal assets, but waives all rights to any marital assets held in trust or acquired via third-party transfer during the marriage. Furthermore, in lieu of alimony, Mr. Bennett agrees to transfer any and all outstanding debt obligations to his personal estate." "You didn't read the fine print, Carter," Sophie said, her voice amplified, booming like the voice of a god. "When you signed this, you didn't just give me the Honda Civic. You triggered the default clauses in your business loans. The banks seized your shares at 5 p.m. to cover your debts, and at 5:01 p.m., I bought them from the bank." Carter stared at the screen, the letters blurred. "I bought them for pennies on the dollar," Sophie added, twisting the knife. "The company is mine, Carter. The building is mine. The patents are mine. Even the chair you sit in at your office. Mine." Carter looked around wildly. The faces of the elite were looking at him with mixture of pity and disgust. He turned to Vanessa for support. Vanessa was standing up. She looked at Carter, then at the stage where Sophie stood, glowing in diamonds. "You're broke?" Vanessa screeched, her voice shrill. "You told me you were worth 50 million. "Vanessa, baby, it's a trick. I can fix this." Carter grabbed for her hand. Vanessa slapped him. The sound echoed through the silent room. "Don't touch me, you loser, you fraud." She grabbed her clutch and stormed away, pushing through the crowd toward the exit. Laughter bubbled up in the room. First a few chuckles, then a roar of amusement. The great Carter Bennett, the man who thought he was a king, was being publicly eviscerated. Carter turned back to the stage, his face purple with rage. "You planned this!" he screamed, losing all control. "You deceived me! You sat in my house for 3 years, pretending to be nobody!" Sophie leaned into the microphone. Her voice dropped an octave, becoming deadly serious. "I didn't pretend to be nobody, Carter. I was just me. I cooked your meals. I listened to your stories. I supported your dreams. I gave you 3 years to show me 1 ounce of kindness, to show me that you loved me, not just what I could do for you." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "You failed the test, Carter. You fell in love with the reflection of yourself you saw in my eyes. And when you thought I was of no use to you, you threw me away like garbage. Well, one man's trash is another man's $1 trillion empire." She signaled to the side of the stage. "Security. Please remove the trespasser. This is a private event for solvent individuals only." 2 massive guards materialized at Carter's elbows. He tried to shrug them off. "Get your hands off me. I'm Carter Bennett." "Sir, come with us quietly," one guard grunted. As they dragged him toward the exit, his feet scuffing the floor, Carter looked back one last time. Sophie was already turning away from him, raising a glass of champagne to toast a senator at the front table. She didn't look back. She had already forgotten him. The heavy doors of the Met slammed shut behind him, leaving him on the cold concrete steps. It started to rain. Carter checked his pockets for his phone to call a Uber. He realized his phone was still on the table inside. He reached for his wallet. Empty. He had given his last $100 bill to Sophie yesterday. He stood in the rain, in his tuxedo, realizing that for the first time in his life, he was exactly what he had called Sophie, a peasant. But the story wasn't over. Sophie wasn't done with him yet. Because taking his money was just business, what she had planned next was personal. The pawn shop on 8th Avenue smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. Carter Bennett stood at the counter, watching the pawnbroker examine his Patek Philippe watch with a jeweler's loupe. The watch had cost him $20,000 just 3 days ago. $3 grand, the pawnbroker grunted, tossing it onto the velvet tray. 3? Carter choked. That's a Patek. It's brand new. It's worth 20 at least. No box, no papers, and it's scratched, the man said, bored. Take it or leave it. I got a line of people behind you. Carter looked behind him. A man clutching a guitar case and a woman holding a blender were staring at him. He swallowed his pride, a taste that was becoming bitterly familiar, and nodded. Fine, give me the cash. He walked out into the rain with a thick envelope of $100 bills. It was enough to survive for a month, maybe 2 if he was careful. But Carter Bennett had no intention of surviving. He intended to win. Over the last 48 hours, rage had calcified his heart. He didn't see his downfall as a result of his own arrogance. He saw it as a theft. Sophie had stolen his company. She had stolen his life, and he was going to steal it back. He hailed a taxi and gave the driver an address in Queens. He wasn't going to a hotel. He was going to see the one man in New York who hated the Caldwell family almost as much as he did right now. The taxi dropped him off at a rusted shipyard. Inside a converted shipping container office sat Liam Donovan. Donovan was a corporate raider from the old school, a man who had been pushed out of the tech sector by the Obsidian Group 5 years prior. Donovan looked up from a stack of racing forms as Carter entered. He was a heavy-set man with a scar running through his eyebrow. Well, look at this, Donovan chuckled, lighting a cigar. The fallen prince. I saw you on the news, Bennett, getting tossed out of the Met like a drunk teenager. Nice look. Cut the crap, Donovan, Carter snapped, sitting on a plastic chair. I know you want revenge on Obsidian. I know Sophie Caldwell destroyed your merger with TechCore back in 2020. Donovan's eyes narrowed. She's a shark, a silent one. What of it? She's untouchable now. She owns the banks, the courts, and half the politicians. She's not untouchable. Carter leaned in, his eyes feverish. She has a weakness. She has a secret. Oh. And what's that? Me, Carter lied. I was married to her for 3 years. I know where the bodies are buried. I know the override codes for the Bennett Dynamics server, the server that is now integrated into Obsidian's main network. Donovan sat up straighter. The central mainframe. You have access. I have the biometric key. Carter bluffed. My retinal scan was never purged from the system because the acquisition happened so fast. If I can get into the server room at the old headquarters, I can upload a worm. I can drain her accounts. I can crash her stock. I can burn Obsidian to the ground from the inside. And why do you need me? I need a team, Carter said. I need a hacker to write the worm, and I need muscle to get me past the perimeter. You have the connections. I have the key. Donovan studied him for a long moment, the smoke from his cigar curling around his face. Then a greedy smile spread across his lips. If this works, we short the stock before the crash. We make billions. We make billions, Carter agreed, and Sophie Caldwell goes back to being nothing. The plan was set for 2 nights later. It was a suicide mission, desperate and reckless, but Carter was fueled by a toxic mix of humiliation and delusion. The night of the break-in was overcast. Donovan's team, 2 ex-military contractors named Briggs and Kane, cut the power to the external security grid of the Bennett Dynamics building at 3 a.m. Carter wore a black tactical turtleneck he had bought at an Army-Navy surplus store. He felt ridiculous, yet powerful. He was taking control. Power is down, Briggs whispered into his earpiece. Service entrance is open. You have 10 minutes before the backup generators reboot the cameras. They moved through the loading dock, creeping through the dark hallways of the building Carter used to own. It was ghostly. His name had already been scraped off the walls. The lobby portrait of him was gone, replaced by a sleek, abstract sculpture of black obsidian stone. They reached the server room on the 40th floor. This is it, Carter whispered, his heart hammering against his ribs. He approached the biometric scanner. If this doesn't work, Bennett, Kane growled, adjusting the silencer on his pistol. I'm leaving you here for the cops. It'll work, Carter said, sweating. He leaned in. The red laser scanned his eye. Beep. Access granted. The heavy steel doors hissed open. I told you, Carter hissed triumphantly. She forgot to delete me. She's arrogant, just like I was. They rushed inside the server room, a freezing, cold chamber filled with humming blue lights. Carter ran to the main terminal. He plugged in the USB drive Donovan had given him. Uploading the payload, Carter muttered, typing furiously. Say goodbye to your empire, Sophie. The progress bar on the screen moved. 10%, 40%, 80%. Then at 99% it stopped. The screen flashed red. Error. Trap detected. Suddenly, the lights in the room shifted from cool blue to blinding white. The door behind them slammed shut with a deafening clang. What did you do? Briggs shouted, raising his weapon. I didn't do anything! Carter screamed, hitting the keyboard. It's frozen. A voice echoed through the room, not from the computer, but from the ceiling speakers. Hello, Carter. It was Sophie. You didn't really think it would be that easy, did you? Her voice was calm, almost amused. Did you honestly believe I forgot to delete your biometric data? The man who checks his stock portfolio 5 times an hour but forgets his wife's birthday. Carter spun around, looking at the security camera in the corner. Show yourself. Look at the screen, Carter. On the massive monitor wall, a video feed appeared. It showed a boardroom. Sitting at the head of the table was Sophie, sipping tea. Standing next to her was Liam Donovan. Carter's blood ran cold. "Donovan," Carter whispered. On the screen, Donovan shrugged. "Sorry, kid. Business is business. I called Miss Caldwell 10 minutes after you left my office. Turns out she was willing to pay a lot more for my loyalty than you were." "You traitor!" Carter screamed at the screen. "It's not treachery, Carter," Sophie said softly. "It's due diligence. I knew you would come. I knew you couldn't accept defeat. I needed you to commit a felony. A real one. Something undeniable. Breaking and entering, corporate espionage, attempted cyber terrorism." Sophie leaned into the camera lens, her blue eyes icy. "The police are already in the elevator, Carter. And this time, there's no divorce settlement to save you. You wanted to be inside the building so badly. Congratulations. You're going to be processed in it." The server room doors hissed open again, but it wasn't a way out. A SWAT team poured in, shields raised, rifles pointed directly at Carter's chest. "Get on the ground, now!" As Carter was shoved face first into the cold, anti-static floor, he looked up at the screen. Sophie watched him for 1 second longer, then picked up a remote and clicked the screen off. She didn't even stay to watch him get cuffed. He wasn't worth her time. The sound of the heavy iron gate sliding shut behind him was the loudest thing Carter Bennett had heard in 4 years. 460 days. That was the exact count. He had marked them off on the concrete wall of his cell with a piece of stolen chalk, a ritual that kept him sane while the rest of his mind slowly disintegrated. Carter stood on the sidewalk outside the correctional facility in upstate New York. It was a Tuesday morning in November, and the air smelled of wet leaves and diesel fumes. He was wearing the suit he had been arrested in, the black tactical turtleneck and slacks, but they hung loosely on his frame now. He had lost 30 pounds in prison. His hair, once styled with $50 clay, was thinning and grey at the temples. His skin had the pasty, translucent quality of a man who hadn't seen direct sunlight without a fence in the way for nearly half a decade. He checked his pockets. A bus ticket, $40 in cash, a crumpled release form. No limousine waited for him. No lawyer. No Vanessa. Vanessa had visited him exactly once, 2 weeks after his arrest. She hadn't come to offer support. She had come to scream at him through the plexiglass for ruining her credit score and to tell him she was selling the engagement ring he had bought on credit. That was the last time he heard her name. Carter boarded the Greyhound bus headed for New York City. He sat in the back, near the bathroom, pulling his collar up to hide his face. He wasn't afraid of being recognized. He was afraid of seeing the world he used to own passing him by through the dirty window. As the bus merged onto the highway, Carter closed his eyes. He thought about the plan. In prison, he had fantasized about this moment. He told himself he would rise again. He was Carter Bennett. He was a visionary. He would start a consulting firm. He would write a tell-all book exposing Sophie. He would claw his way back to the penthouse. But as the skyline of Manhattan came into view, jagged and grey against the winter sky, Carter felt a cold realization settle in his gut. The city didn't look like a kingdom anymore. It looked like a fortress, and the drawbridge was pulled up. The first 3 months of his freedom were a brutal lesson in the permanence of digital footprints. Carter applied to 22 boutique financial firms. He didn't aim for the top-tier banks. He knew they were out of reach. He aimed for the desperate ones, the small shops that needed aggressive sales tactics. The interviews always started well. He still had the voice. He still knew how to shake a hand. But then came the background check. Mr. Bennett, a 25-year-old HR manager at a small firm in Jersey City, said, looking at her tablet with a scowl. "It says here you were convicted of corporate espionage and attempted cyber-terrorism against the Obsidian Group." "It was a misunderstanding," Carter said, his smile tight and painful. "A marital dispute that got out of hand. I have a brilliant track record before that." "You tried to hack the global banking infrastructure," she interrupted, looking at him as if he were radioactive. "We can't even insure you to be in the building. Please leave." The rejections piled up like snowdrifts. His money ran out. The halfway house he was assigned to was loud, smelling of bleach and despair. He needed a job. Any job. He pawned his wedding ring, the one Sophie had bought him, the one he had thrown in a drawer because it wasn't flashy enough. It got him $200. By January, Carter Bennett, the former CEO of Bennett Dynamics, was scrubbing toilets. He had landed a job as a night shift porter at the Sovereign, one of Manhattan's oldest and most luxurious hotels. It was a cruel twist of fate. He used to stay at the Sovereign. He used to have the presidential suite. He used to tip the doorman $100 just for opening the door. Now, he was the invisible man in the cheap polyester uniform, pushing a mop bucket across the marble floors at 300 a.m., praying that none of the guests would look him in the eye. The night of the Winter Solstice Charity Gala was the coldest night of the year. The wind howled through the avenues, rattling the glass panes of the hotel's grand entrance. The hotel manager, a short man named Mr. Henderson, who seemed to delight in Carter's misery, found him in the break room eating a stale sandwich. "Bennett," Henderson barked, "we're short-staffed. The coat check girl called out sick. I need you up front." Carter froze. "Mr. Henderson, I can't work at the front. I'm maintenance. I'm not supposed to be guest-facing." "I don't care what you are," Henderson snapped. "Put on a blazer and get behind the counter, unless you want to go back to the halfway house and explain why you can't pay your rent this week." Carter swallowed his pride. It tasted like ash. "Yes, sir." He put on the oversized hotel blazer. It smelled of mothballs. He walked to the coat check station, a small alcove near the grand ballroom. The gala was in full swing. The music drifted out, a live string quartet playing Vivaldi. The smell of expensive perfume and roasted duck filled the air. Carter stood behind the counter, taking mink coats and cashmere scarves from men who looked exactly like he used to look. They handed him tickets without glancing at his face. To them, he was just a pair of hands, a servant. Around 10:15 p.m., a hush fell over the lobby. The heavy revolving doors spun, and a gust of freezing air swept in, followed by a flurry of activity. "She's here," a security guard whispered near the coat check. "Look sharp." Carter looked up. Entering the hotel was a woman flanked by 4 security guards. She was laughing, shaking the snow off a long, white wool coat. It was Sophie. Time seemed to warp, slowing down to a painful crawl. She looked different than the last time he had seen her on the screen in the server room. The sharp, predatory edge she had worn during his destruction was gone. In its place was a luminous, calm confidence. She wore a gown of deep emerald green that accentuated her eyes. Her hair was loose, framing a face that seemed younger, happier, lighter. But she wasn't alone. Holding her hand was a man. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair and a kind face. He was helping her with her coat, leaning in to whisper something that made her smile. A genuine, crinkling of the eyes smile that Carter had never seen in 3 years of marriage. And there was something else. As she unbuttoned her coat, Carter saw the curve of her stomach. She was pregnant, heavily pregnant. The air left Carter's lungs. He felt dizzy, grabbing the edge of the mahogany counter to steady himself. This was the life he could have had. If he had just been kind. If he had just looked at her and seen a person instead of a prop. That child could have been his. That laughter could have been for him. The couple moved toward the coat check. Carter panicked. He wanted to run. He wanted to hide under the counter. He couldn't let her see him like this. Broken, grey, serving as a clerk in a hotel he used to command. But there was nowhere to go. They were already there. The man smiled at Carter, handing him the white wool coat. "Good evening," the man said. His accent was French, refined and polite. "It is freezing out there tonight, no?" "Yes," Carter rasped, his voice unrecognizable even to himself. He took the coat. His hands were shaking so badly the hanger rattled. Sophie was looking at her phone, typing a quicker message. She didn't look up immediately. "Here is your ticket, sir," Carter whispered, handing the plastic tag to the Frenchman. "Sophie, my love," the man said, turning to her. "Ready?" Sophie looked up. She turned her gaze toward the counter. Carter braced himself. He waited for the shock. He waited for the anger. He waited for the moment of recognition where she would realize that her ex-husband, the man who mocked her poverty, was now taking her coat. He prepared himself for her to call security, to have him thrown out, to humiliate him one last time. Sophie's blue eyes locked onto his face. She looked at his thinning hair. She looked at his name tag that read Carter. She looked directly into his eyes, and then she smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph. It wasn't a sneer. It was the polite, distant smile one gives to a stranger. "Thank you," she said softly. She turned away, taking her husband's arm. "Shall we go in, Pierre? The board is waiting." "After you, chérie," the man said. They walked away toward the ballroom, the sound of their laughter fading into the music. Carter stood frozen behind the counter. He gripped the white wool coat, her coat, in his hands. She hadn't recognized him. It wasn't that she was pretending. He knew Sophie. He knew her tells. If she had recognized him, there would have been a flicker, a tightening of the jaw, a dilation of the pupil. There was nothing. To her, he was no longer Carter Bennett, the villain of her life. He was just a face in the crowd, a blurry background character in the movie of her triumphant existence. He had become so insignificant, so utterly erased from her world, that even standing 3 feet away, staring into his eyes, she saw nothing but a coat check attendant. This was the ultimate punishment. Hate would have meant he still mattered. Anger would have meant he still held power over her emotions. Indifference was a death sentence. Carter sank onto the stool behind the counter. He buried his face in the soft wool of the coat. It smelled of jasmine and vanilla, the same perfume she used to wear when they were married. The perfume he had once told her was too cheap. A sob racked his body. Then another. He wept, silently and uncontrollably, in the lobby of the Sovereign Hotel. He cried for the money, yes. But mostly, he cried because he finally understood the magnitude of his crime. He hadn't just killed a marriage. He had killed the version of himself that was worthy of love. "Hey!" Mr. Henderson's voice cut through the air. "Bennett, what are you doing sniffing the guests' coats? Are you sick?" Carter snapped his head up, wiping his eyes frantically. No, sir. Just allergies." "Well, pull it together," Henderson sneered. "People are watching. You look pathetic." Carter stood up. He hung Sophie's coat on the rack, placing it carefully between a sable fur and a trench coat. He smoothed down the fabric, his hand lingering for a second on the shoulder. "Yes, sir," Carter whispered. "I'll get back to work." He straightened his cheap blazer. He forced a neutral expression onto his face. He stood at attention, waiting for the next rich man to hand him a coat, waiting for the night to end, waiting for a morning that would bring nothing but more of the same. Outside, The snow continued to fall, burying the city in white silence. Inside the ballroom, the applause began. Thunderous, adoring applause for Sophie Caldwell. Carter Bennett listened to the sound of her victory through the closed doors. He stood in the hallway, a ghost haunting a life he had already died in. And as the applause reached its crescendo, Carter realized the cruelest truth of all. The story wasn't about him anymore. It never really was. Carter Bennett spent his life chasing gold, never realizing he was holding a diamond until he threw it away. His story is a brutal reminder that arrogance is the most expensive luxury in the world. He thought Sophie's silence was weakness, but he learned too late that the quietest people often have the loudest minds and the deepest pockets. In the end, Carter got exactly what he asked for, a life without Sophie. And he found out that without her, his life was worth nothing at all. Wow, talk about a reality check. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What do you think? Did Carter deserve his fate? Or was it too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.